All right, welcome to a start of a new week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. We cover it all at Panther-Lair.com all day, every day, and of course message boards where you can interact with other Pitt fans literally all day, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Pitt fans are on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com talking about Pitt sports. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We got a lot of coverage there of everything from the weekend. And, of course, we bring it all here to you every morning, Monday through Friday on the Morning Pitt. You get your morning shower, you get your morning shave, and you get your Morning Pitt at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The subscribe button is right down there, somewhere around there. There's a little blue rectangle. It says subscribe. Click that thing, turn on the notifications, and then you'll get an alert every time we go live, sent right to your phone. Every time we're live here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know, we do our live show, our weekly live show on Wednesday nights at 8:30. We do a post-game show on Saturdays after the Pitt football games. I don't think we're going to do them after every basketball game, but we'll still have our weekly live show on Wednesday nights. And, you know, if there's a basketball on Wednesday night, a basketball game on a Wednesday night, we might have to change the date and go on a Tuesday or a Thursday. If you want to make sure you don't miss the live stream, click subscribe and turn on notifications, and you'll get an alert sent to your phone. You'll always know when we go live. You know, this weekend, Steelers lost. Both of my fantasy football teams lost. But two Pitt teams won. Actually, more than two Pitt teams won, and there's some other teams that we do need to talk about. We'll talk about this week. But the Pitt football team and the Pitt men's basketball team both came out of the weekend with wins. Pitt football on Saturday, and the 28-26 win over Duke at Acrisure Stadium, and then Pitt basketball on Sunday, 73-54 win over Alabama State. Both of those games unique and interesting in their own ways, we'll say. Both of those games certainly felt like they were headed for losses at certain points in the game. Both of those games featured some key plays, made it key moments. And you know, there aren't a ton of parallels between those two games, but it is interesting that I bet your emotions, if you watch the Pitt football game on Saturday and the Pitt basketball game on Sunday, I imagine your emotions really ran the gamut from early enthusiasm and encouragement, to probably some despair at various points in the game, and ultimately satisfaction with a victory. And I want to start on the football side of it. We're going to talk football and basketball today, since there were games with both teams in the last 48 hours. You know, there was an interesting thing that happened after the Pitt football game on Saturday, after that 28-26 win. And look, we had a live stream on Saturday night. We talked a lot about that game at that point. I think we all have sort of the same reaction. I mean, that was a game that Pitt very well could have lost and certainly put itself in jeopardy of losing. Mike Elko's decision to go for two on Duke's third touchdown, while analytically may have made sense, ultimately cost them the game because they failed to make the crucial two-point conversion on their fourth touchdown that would have sent the game to overtime, whereas just kicking the extra points would have let it happen right there. Or at least you kick an extra point on the third touchdown, and then you can make a decision on your fourth touchdown if you want to go for two and risk losing the game by one, and but take it, have a chance at winning, or if you just want to kick the extra point and go into overtime. That's neither here nor there. I think we all had pretty much the same reaction to that game, varying degrees, but ultimately the same reaction. But there was something interesting after the game. And Pat Narduzzi had a quote after the game that I think might have been a callback to arguably Narduzzi's best quote ever as Pitt head coach. And it was one of the first quotes he ever gave as Pitt head coach. I think his introductory press conference, I want to say it was December 26th, 2014. It was a day or two after Christmas, 2014. And, he had just been introduced as the new Pitt head coach. He got up to the podium and gave his opening statement and talked a lot and said all these things about what the program's going to be and all this. I mean, you know how these new head coach press conferences go. Believe me, we've all seen plenty of them around Pitt over the last decade or two. And so Pat Narduzzi gets up there and he talks about all the things he's going to do at Pitt and what the program's going to look like and this and that and on and on and on, as these coaches do. And he gets to the end of his opening statement, which was long, and he closes it with a phrase that I think is infamous at this point. And if you don't know it, you should know it. You should find a clip of it and burn it into your brain, because he says, "Hail to Pitt, I guess, right?" It's a great quote in so many ways. It sums up so much. Hail to Pitt, I guess, right? and I think you should write it out. Hail to Pitt, comma, I guess, comma, right, question mark. It was great. And I don't know if he realized it or not, but he absolutely made a callback to that quote after the game on Saturday. He was asked a question about how they have a 3-game winning streak, and as the momentum they're carrying into the final game. And he said this and that. He had kind of an answer, and right near the end of his answer, he said it. He said, "We've got momentum, I guess, right?" I couldn't believe it when I heard it. I had to go back and reread the transcript. I went back and listened to it myself. Pitt sends out a sort of an official transcript after a press conference like that, after the post-game press conferences and the Monday press conferences. And, they're accurate. They're like 95% accurate. Sometimes things are edited for clarity or whatever. So I went back and just to double check and make sure, and absolutely, we've got momentum, I guess, right? And it was a great callback as a quote. First of all, it was just an excellent callback that made me delighted, and I don't know if anybody else picked up on it, but hopefully you'll hear it yourself now if you go watch that press conference video. But it also sort of, I think, if you think about the quote and what he's saying, it should connect you with Pat Narduzzi pretty well. Because the reality is, Pat Narduzzi was asked about having momentum from a 3-game winning streak, which is what Pitt has. Pitt has won the last 3 games. They beat Syracuse, they won at Virginia, and they beat Duke, right? So they have a 3-game winning streak heading into the season finale at Miami this Saturday. That's all accurate. That is true. It is a 3-game winning streak. And a winning streak should beget momentum. But it's funny because Pat Narduzzi was asked this question in the aftermath of the Duke game, and I think Narduzzi had the same reaction to the Duke game that you had and I had and everyone else had. Of, whew, that was a win. Just barely. And sure did do a whole lot to try to give it away. And almost give it away. And he had a number of quotes like that saying we made stupid mistakes. We did it the hard way. Things along that line. Another one that was really good. With as much as we gave them, we came out with a W. He said we made some stupid mistakes out there, which drive me nuts. He said, "I'll go home and watch this videotape and make myself sick. We gave them too much today." Pat Narduzzi had the same reaction to that game you did. Of, it shouldn't have been that close. Pitt was the only reason that it was that close. Pitt's mistakes kept Duke in the game and gave Duke an opportunity. And certainly, to be fair, Duke made plenty of mistakes of their own. They had a drop touchdown pass. They had a fumbled punt return. They made plenty of mistakes to give Pitt, the 2-point conversion. I think would probably go in that category. And I hope I didn't anger the analytics-minded among us, but look, that was. And so Duke made plenty of mistakes as well. Duke handed this game to Pitt in a lot of ways, and Pitt was just as gracious in trying to give it right back to the Blue Devils. And I think, coming out of another game where the offense didn't score any touchdowns in the second half, the offense scored 2 points because they had a 2-point conversion after Brandon Hill's fumble return for a touchdown, his scoop and score. The offense doesn't score. The defense gives up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, although admittedly one of those touchdowns was a 22-yard drive after a Pitt's punter fumbled the ball and gave Duke the ball at the Pitt 22. So the defense gave up 1 long touchdown drive, 1 short touchdown drive, but also scored a touchdown of its own. So a little bit of struggles for the defense, a little bit of a collapse, but maybe not as much as if you just look at it and say, boy, they gave up 2 touchdowns to almost tie the game at the end. They also made 2 stops on 2-point conversions, which obviously loomed large, huge in those situations. But another game where the offense just struggles. Another game where there are special teams gaffes and miscues all over the place. And another game where the defense does give up a few plays. And I think Pat Narduzzi, standing at the podium being asked about the momentum that his team has, probably didn't feel like his team had a whole lot of momentum at that moment. And maybe as you get into the week, some of that momentum starts to show up. You start to feel like you have a little bit more momentum, but it doesn't feel like Pitt has momentum. It feels like they're barely holding on right now at this point. They beat Syracuse 19-8. But that's a 17-9 game, a one-score game until they get a safety at the very, very end to make it a 10-point game. They beat Virginia 37-7. That's cool, except 2 of the touchdowns right off the bat are the first 2 plays of the game on pick sixes. And so it's, offense to offense, you're looking at a 23-7 game. Well, you feel a little less excited about that. And then this game where, 28-14 turns into 28-26. Some key stops on defense, a few plays on offense. They had a great drive to end the first half, the 2-minute and 44-minute drive, or 2-minute and 44-second drive, or 48-second, whatever they ended up ruling it. But it's hard to say it feels like they've got a little momentum. But here's the thing. At this point, we've watched this team for 11 games. We've seen this team play for 11 games. We know who they are. We know what they are. We know what they can do, and we know what they're capable of. And I'm speaking almost exclusively of the offensive at this point, of the offense right now. We know who they are. And it's not going to be pretty. It has not been pretty all season, save for some sporadic success, some fleeting moments of success, and a whole lot of potential that seems to be unrealized. Well, if you get through 11 games and you haven't realized your potential yet, you haven't reached your potential or reached your ceiling yet, you're probably not going to. And so, at this point, if we go into this final game, this Miami game, or we go into the bowl game, wherever that may be, whenever that may be, against whomever that may be, still looking for it to be this complete game where they play really well, start to finish, and it's great, and they look outstanding, and everything's, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And there was a while a little bit ago where I had sort of convinced myself of that. They are who they are. They've shown us who they are. Stop trying to wait for that moment where this offense turns the corner. But then the last 3 games, they seem to get better. I really, I did a Morning Pitt video last week where we asked the question, is Pitt's offense getting better? Because there were signs of improvement. I thought the North Carolina game, they were better than they were against Louisville. I thought the Syracuse game, they were better than they were against North Carolina. I thought the Virginia game, they were better than they were against Syracuse. The Duke game, they weren't better than they were against Virginia. That was a step back. Aside from basically one drive at the end of the second quarter, it was a step back offensively. Which probably reinforces the point that there aren't going to be that many steps forward. And if there are, they're not going to be enough to give you the impression that they played good offense for an entire game or even 3/4 of a game. They're lucky if they can get a half of good offense at this point, just with the way they're playing and the way they've played. That breakthrough is not going to come. That corner is not going to be turned. And so, I think the best thing for your sanity probably is to be very results-oriented, to try not to lose your mind in the middle of a game as you're watching them sort of stumble up and down the field, and just, hang on for dear life, embrace the chaos, and hope they can come out with a win at the end. Like they did against Syracuse, like they did against Virginia, like they did against Duke. That's my best advice at this point, because whatever sort of gelling or coming together or evolution, we've all been waiting to see from this offense. This isn't week 5. This isn't week 3. This is game 11. We're far enough into the season to know it's not going to happen. So they've got momentum, I guess. Right? -7, the opening line for Pitt at Miami this weekend. I was on Circa Sports, tweeted out that line yesterday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Pitt at Miami, -7. Pitt is a 7-point favorite. Over and under 40.5 points. Look, Miami's bad. Miami's got 5 wins. Miami's playing for a bowl game this week against Pitt. I mean, they're trying to reach bowl eligibility. They've got something to play for. Pitt is trying to get to 8 wins. They're trying to have, ideally position themselves for a better bowl. neither team has lived up to the expectations it had before the season. Miami, a lot of their success is going to rely on whether or not Tyler Van Dyke is available for this game. And I don't know what's going to happen there. I'm guessing Mario Cristobal will play coy with the information from here through the end of the week, and that would certainly impact things. But the reality is Pitt has always had trouble down there. They won in 2014, the regular season finale, sort of like this, against a Miami team that absolutely had quit. And the last time Pitt won at Miami prior to 2014 was 1963, like 10 days after Kennedy was shot. I mean, or a week or something after the Kennedy assassination. It's been that long. They have one win in Miami since the Kennedy assassination. Well, 2 wins in Miami since the Kennedy assassination, because that game was after. I think it was after. I'll have to look up the date. But it was 1963. It was 1963. 2014? Question mark. Maybe 2022. According to that, Circa Sports, Pitt's favored by a touchdown, which, you get to that 3-point home field advantage thing, which I know Miami has about as much of a home field advantage as Pitt does. But, it kind of translates to if Pitt Miami were playing on a neutral field, presumably Pitt would be a 10-point favorite over Miami, who they struggled to beat. They beat them in 2017. They beat them in 2014. Before that, 1997? Did they have I don't think they had an early 2000s win against Miami. We'll definitely dig into all the stats and numbers this week. But it's been tough for Pitt against Miami. It's been a long time since they've won at Miami. It's been a long time since they've beaten Miami. It's been a challenge for them to beat Miami. No matter what the matchup looks like, whether it's a good Miami team or a bad Miami team, it's been a challenge for them to beat Miami. So we'll see what happens this week. All right, basketball side. Because if we thought we saw some real nonsense on Saturday at Acrisure Stadium, we had no idea what we were in for on Sunday at the Peterson Event Center. You talk about games where it feels like a loss, and ultimately, so this is different. All right, this game was different because by the end of this, with Pitt winning by 19, it didn't feel like a loss. I mean, it felt like a really strong performance. It felt like they played well. And that's largely because in the second half they did. They were 15 of 29 from the floor. That's better than 50% in the second half. They hit 7 of 14 from 3 in the second half. I mean, they played lights out. But the reality is, with 6 minutes to go in the first half, they were down by 12, 30-18. And at that point, I think, Jeff Capel got fired a billion times on Twitter and the message boards at that point when Pitt was losing by 12, because everyone was convinced there was no chance they could come back. And I was having serious doubts about it myself. But I'll tell you what happened that sort of keyed the change. Number one, they started playing better defense. I mean, Alabama State was not a good shooting team. They haven't been a good shooting team through their 4 losses so far this season. And there was no reason that they should continue being able to shoot like they did. They were 4 of 7 from 3 in the first half. They shot 46% from the floor in the first half. They weren't going to keep that up. I think they hit 4 of their first 6 3-pointers. They weren't going to keep that up if Pitt started defending better. And they did. And what happened on the other end of the court, though, is I think what was really key. And I think it pointed out 2 guys who are going to be so essential to what Pitt does this season. Because after we got to 30-18, the next basket, around the 5:20 mark, was Blake Hinson backing down a defender, just muscling his way to the hoop. The next basket after that was John Hughley getting an and one and converting. Now it's gone from a 12-point game to a 7-point game. The next basket, another Hughley basket. Alabama State hit a jump shot in the middle of the zone because Pitt was using a zone defense that was kind of effective, actually, but Arizona State did get to the free throw line a couple times. Nate Santos drove to the basket. Alabama State hit one in the middle of the zone. So it's 34-27 with about 2 minutes left to play. And Blake Hinson again comes through. He gets an and one, converts it, and then hits 1 of 2 free throws right before the end of the half, and it's a 34-31 game. So over the final 5.5 minutes of the first half, Pitt went on a 12-4 run, and 10 of their 12 points came from John Hughley and Blake Hinson. They each had an and one that they converted, and they each had a layup. Oh, actually, yeah. Hinson had 6 points. No. They both scored. they each had 5 points. They each had 5 out of they each had 10 out of the 12. Or the 13, actually. I'm sorry, it was a 13-4 run. I said it was a 12-4 run. It was a 13-4 run. Blake Hinson had 6 points, John Hughley had 5, and Nate Santos scored 2. But those two guys, Hinson and Hughley, I think are the keys here. Now, obviously, Nelly Cummings has to play well. He had a pretty good game. Not a great shooting percentage. He was 4 of 14 from the floor, 2 of 8 from 3. But he scored 10 points. He grabbed 6 rebounds. He had 5 assists and just 2 turnovers. That's a good stat line for Nelly Cummings. Not necessarily the shooting, but that's a good, 10, 6, 5, and only 2 turnovers. You want that out of Nelly Cummings every night. Now, he had to play 38 minutes because Jamarius Burton was out, and they really didn't have anybody else who could bring the ball up the court. Nike Subandi played a ton. He played 28 minutes and ended up with 17 points. But he's still not even like a point guard who's really going to bring the ball up the court. They needed Jamarius Burton out there for Nelly Cummings to get a rest. Cummings ends up playing almost the entire game, 38 minutes and 17 seconds. So all but a minute 43, Cummings is out there. He's got to play well. Jamarius Burton has to be good. You need Greg Elliott to hit shots. You'd like Nate Santos to start shooting a little bit better than he has been. But it's really, as they get settled in and get their rotation settled, and as they get closer to ACC play, it's really going to be about Blake Hinson and John Hughley. Those are the two guys who are I think, are going to make this work. And Hinson, so far this season through 5 games, I would contend has been Pitt's best player, best overall player. And once you get John Hughley in for another 5 games and he gets back up to speed and gets his conditioning and gets settled in with the team and comfortable with his teammates, he should reclaim his rightful position as the best player on the team. But Blake Hinson, I think, through 5 games has been Pitt's best player. And there were points in this game where I said, let him take over. Like the ball should go to Blake Hinson all the time because he's the only one who's out there really kind of asserting himself. And Jeff Capel talked after the game about a lack of confidence, about, the guys seem to be a little bit shook from the 3 losses in a row, the West Virginia, the Michigan, the VCU loss, 2 games they got beat pretty bad, 1 game that they had, and then it sort of slipped away. And he said he could see it in the first half with the shooting, that they just didn't look confident. Well, Blake Hinson looked confident. Blake Hinson, I don't think, will ever lack for confidence. And he's got the kind of attitude that this team needs to pick up on. This team needs to thrive on. His teammates need to feed off of his attitude and his approach to the game because it's what they all need to emulate. This team needs to be like Blake Hinson. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways. In his approach, how he plays, his toughness, his willingness to shoot, his willingness to try to take over a game, his willingness to try to buy a foul with a flop. He's gotten 2 of these Class B technicals or whatever they're called, these one-shot technical fouls for flopping. He had 1 against Michigan. He had 1 again yesterday in the game against Alabama State. You don't want to get called for that and end up having, giving the other team a free point on a free throw. But there is a certain competitive spirit to it. And I think the rest of the team needs that too. They need to be able to feed off that. And he's tough and he'll get physical and he'll play with an edge. He'll play with some attitude. I think Greg Elliott could be that as well, though maybe not as tough and physical as Hinson is. But I think this team needs what Blake Hinson brings, and I think they need it to sort of spread around. I think you need more guys playing like him with sort of the like I say, the confidence, the aggressiveness, the assertiveness that he plays with. And I think it was big. I think really it turned around. This game turned around thanks to the efforts of Blake Hinson and John Hughley in the final 5.5 minutes of the first half. I think those were the guys who made it happen. And so kudos to them because they, ended up keying a game where, it turns into a 19-point blowout. They were trailing by 12. So that's a pretty significant turnaround and a pretty strong performance from Pitt, particularly in the second half. Like I say, they played really well in the second half. In the second half, they did to Alabama State what they should have been doing the entire game against Alabama State. They get a little stretch here. They get Fairleigh Dickinson on Tuesday night. They need to keep rolling here. They need to have more games like the second half of the Alabama State game. Get Jamarius Burton back on the court. Get John Hughley further along and more up to speed, and start trying to build some consistency with this lineup, some continuity with this lineup and rotation, and as they get closer to the ACC games. I don't think they're as bad as they looked against West Virginia or Michigan, or points of the first half yesterday against Alabama State, but they need to avoid playing like that, to be sure. And I think some of these guys we're talking about, I think Hinton Hughley in particular, can have a lot to do with dragging them, pulling them out of it and dragging them to wins. All right. Appreciate everybody who tunes in today. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like I say, we're going to have live stream every Wednesday night at 8:30. We'll have a live post-game show after the Miami game on Saturday. Not sure what time that's going to start. It's probably going to be like midnight or something. So hit that subscribe button right over there, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on notifications. You'll get an alert sent to your phone, and you'll never miss any of our live streams or the Morning Pitt video that we release every day, Monday through Friday. Hope you had a great weekend, at least on the Pitt front. I'm sure you did. If your fantasy team is like mine, you did not have a good weekend on that front. If you're a Steeler fan, you did not have a good weekend. Look, Kenny Pickett, show little signs. Look kind of good. But if you're a Pitt fan, you got two wins, we'll say, from the football and men's basketball program, and some big wins in some of the other sports too, which we're definitely going to have to talk about later this week. So thanks for tuning in this morning. I appreciate it. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you have a great Monday. It's Thanksgiving week, so that's nice. We get a short week here coming up. Hope you enjoy it, and we will talk to you again tomorrow morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.